Yeah, sure.
45 minutes?
Yep, that works. Sure.
Okay.
Do you want this airplane mode or doesn't matter?
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
Yeah, I try to put mine off so I don't have an alarm or anything going off. But it's just very casual.
Okay.
And let's see. Nope, I need to move this way. You come this way a little more. There
This
you
is
go.
an interesting
Yeah.
chair that you've got here.
I apologize. It's Matt's. It's supposed to be really good, like lumbar support, and
sure
it
it
makes you
is.
sit up straight.
I'm sure it is.
I know it's weird. I'm sorry.
Sure it is. Let's talk about it.
I know. Every time I have I don't often have other guests. It's normally just me.
Okay.
So I just come in, record real quick, and then move on. And when I do, I think you're the first guy I've had that's not my husband in this. No, I don't even think I've done an interview with Matt like
wouldn't.
this. What's that?
I wouldn't do it with Matt.
You wouldn't do an interview with him?
No, it should be just you and let him work on his own self.
Yeah, he could figure out his own stuff. I feel like the last couple of times he's had me on his show, and his setup's great.
Yeah, I've done that.
Yeah.
We didn't smoke cigars though.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
He'll get you one.
All right.
Yeah, we could walk down to Chesterton's. You could pick out whatever you want.
Actually-
treat on him.
Actually, the cigars in Vienna. There's a smoke shop in Vienna. I'll have to talk. When are you guys leaving?
Hopefully next Tuesday.
Okay.
We'll see.
There's a great smoke shop, great cigar shop in Vienna.
Okay. Are you
my
more of a
favorite.
cigar guy
Yeah.
or a pipe guy?
Cigar.
Okay, yeah, Matt too.
Although in Vienna, in Austria, you know Father Denny?
Yes.
We did cigar. We did pipes.
Smiley.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
we
love
did,
him.
we did pipes out there, so it's great.
He's beautiful. Because when we moved here, it was still COVID, and I couldn't remember anyone's names.
Yeah,
like we were
sure.
meeting people, and then all of you guys, like I knew
the worst.
who you were
Yeah, it was the
prior,
worst.
so like that was easy, but others, yeah. And so I was like the Smiley priest, and they're like, oh yeah.
No, the Smiley Priest is Nathan.
Oh,
Smiley
that's-
Priest is in Goming.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's what I
that's
meant.
Nathan,
Okay,
yeah.
wait, which one's Denny?
The oldest one.
Oh, I think I know who he is. I don't
Kind
think
of a
I've.
train wreck sometimes, but
Yeah.
he's our train wreck.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
Would it be possible that he prayed over me in the dairy department at Kroger?
Yep, that would be Danny.
Yep, I know who he is.
There's no doubt in my mind that would be
Yep,
Danny.
I've met him at the Newtons multiple times.
Yeah.
But I forget what it was. Something was going on. And then there's a couple other friars up in the front, like waiting. And Father Jonathan and someone else. I was like, hey, are you looking for a fellow friar? And they're like, yep. I'm like, he was just praying over me in the milk section. They're like, yep, that's
He's
Father.
probably in the frozen section. Now.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
yep,
great.
Pretty much.
That'd be him.
Well,
be-
yeah,
that's
Matt.
great.
Yeah, Matt likes a good cigar. I don't mind the pipes. So like we have a room in our house that I'll let him smoke pipes in, and he's only allowed to smoke a cigar when a good bishop friend of ours comes and
Yeah.
visits. So I let them like one time. But
It's interesting.
Cigars smell.
Yeah, 99% of the cigars I've ever smoked are outside. Like I don't like smoking. I like Chesterton. I just don't like smoking indoors,
Okay.
no matter what.
Yeah, you.
But in Austria, we did a pipe, and I thought I would like it because I love the smell of pipe smoke. But then I realized when you smoke it yourself, you don't smell it.
Do you not?
No.
Oh, I didn't know
It
that.
just, yeah. You don't. I was thinking, oh, this would be so great, so it smells so good. No, you don't smell it.
Matt kept trying to convince me it's just incense. So like, it's just incense.
Please.
So yeah, lately I've been more lax about it in the house because I don't mind it, and then I don't really smell it afterwards.
Yeah.
Or cigars or cigarettes. I'm like, no,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. And
you cannot
that's the
smoke
other
that
thing.
indoors.
Not in my habit, because then it means I have to put it in the washing machine immediately. And
Yep, and you'll smell like it for days after.
I know.
Yeah, and your hair. I don't know if you have that problem, but
don't.
I have that
I do
problem
not
where
have that
my hair
problem.
smells like smoke for a
That
while.
would be kind of gross.
It is super gross.
Yeah, I don't have that problem.
Yeah.
I've got issues, but not that one.
Yeah, well, that's
Good.
okay. Well, welcome to Among the Lilies.
Thanks.
Thanks for coming
Among
on.
the Lilies, how'd you come to that?
I was postpartum really bad after my fourth child.
Mm-hmm.
He was really, really sick and almost died multiple times, was on a feeding tube. And once he started to get better, so I didn't sleep for a long time, in and out of hospital, lots of drama. And then once he started to get better, I plummeted. And I actually called Kana Hickman. You know the Hickman?
Oh, sure.
So I called Kana and was like, Matt won't leave me alone. He thinks I'm depressed. I'm not. I just want him and everyone else to leave me alone. I want to stay in my robe and no one to need anything of me.
That sounds fine.
And she's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
Karen,
yeah.
that's totally fine. No, you're not depressed. I want you to call your doctor and tell him you need postpartum meds, whatever it was. And I was like, but I'm not depressed. She's like, of course, Cameron. I know you're not
Who
depressed.
said you were? Right,
I didn't
right,
say
right,
you
right.
were. And the next day, slowly, I felt like the cloud lifted from my head. And then I wanted other people to, like, I don't know, help me through it. Matt was already doing his podcast. I look into podcasts for women, and they were horrible.
Yeah.
Atrocious. And it was like, some of them would be like, oh, sometimes I'm a really bad wife. I haven't mopped my floor in a week.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm going to punch
Yeah,
that
that's
lady
right,
in the
that's right.
face. And I was venting to some friends, and I felt the Lord be like, you have the gift of gab, and you have recording equipment downstairs. Just do it.
Just start talking about it.
So
I don't know. Does St. Joseph have anything to do with that?
no, it's the whole
an image
like,
of
but St. Joseph could be part of it.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's the lily among the fields, and then my like line is for ladies that are tired of pretending and are ready to be real.
That's cool.
Yeah, Mark Hart said, I had a few friends that were like throwing out names in the beginning, and Matt really wanted me to
awesome.
call it. His suggestion was vodka in the linen closet. And
You didn't go with that.
No. I thought among the lilies was a bit
Yeah, I like
nicer.
that. I like that.
I wanted lilies among the thorns because I felt like, I don't know, I was just living in the thick of the
Yeah,
thorns.
yeah.
But I figure either way it works.
It's funny. I am. It's interesting. Just when I hear confessions, oftentimes, especially with moms, they'll just kind of they'll talk a little bit and in some ways just kind of vent. And I would love to have $1 for every time I've said, you know something, being mom is hard, and they just like fall apart, right?
Yeah, break
They're
down
just trying to
crying.
hold it together.
It is
It's
so
like, you are so
hard.
amazing. It's like, but there's just something about that, just calling it, especially honestly, especially in the sacrament of reconciliation, because. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to get into specifics, but so often what they mention isn't even maybe necessarily sin. It's just the weight of being a mom.
Yeah, it's the heaviness on their heart.
Yeah, yeah, in a spouse, and just to hear that, I think is something about that that's freeing for them.
Yeah. And I think also being like, okay, you think this is hard too.
Yeah.
Because you do. You
No,
feel like
and,
you're
and mine was
drowning
from the
in
outside
thick of
looking
it.
in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's sometimes that there's. And you probably talk about it. Truth be told, I've not listened to your podcast yet.
You're not my target audience.
That's right.
I'm geared towards ladies.
But social media is just such a horrible, for many of them, that there's this idea of what they're supposed to be. And even, honestly, truth be told, even some Bible studies and women's groups.
Agreed.
They're just, I was going to say they're not honest.
Squeaky
and
clean.
And that's not fair to say that they're not honest. But
they're trying to be more squeaky clean than the majority of us are.
Yeah.
So maybe some people, like a type A personality who has 1 or 2 kids, maybe she can do that. But that makes the rest of us feel horrible.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So being like real life and not Instagram.
The fact that all the kids are basically alive and fed.
They survived.
And fed. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, that's great.
Yep. At one point, when we were at Seek, Peter was doing something crazy. My youngest was just being insane. And I pointed at, do you know Mother Natalia? She's a
Sure.
I was like, that Muslim woman, that's her kid. And
There
I
you
pointed
go,
at
there
her.
you
She's
go.
like, I'm like, I don't claim him.
I don't even
like,
know who
he's
that
with
is.
you.
I
You're
don't even know who that is.
Muslim woman over there in the corner.
But the other thing about it, and I joke about this, that, I love my life and I'm so grateful for it. You can never turn your life off. I mean, you can never turn that off. Like when I go to my room, I always joke, I go to my room and I close the door. Friars never come to the door knocking, crying, wanting anything. It's like when I close my door in the evening, it's me and it's quiet. And it's not always peaceful because things can go crazy in my brain, right? But you can't do that. Yeah.
It's
and
definitely,
moms can't do
motherhood is a road to sanctity and
oh,
suffering.
absolutely.
It's filled with suffering, and I am so grateful for it. But yeah, like it's hard. I think it's hard for looking back before I was a mom. Like I feel like I was struggling with, I was way more selfish, way more. And you can't.
It roots it out.
Yeah.
No, I think as a selfish parent, I don't know. The thing that went through my mind, it becomes an addict. I don't know how you drink, you work, you do something, but I don't see how you can reconcile those things. Yeah.
No, you learn to die to yourself very quickly
Yeah.
for love of the little one.
Yeah. And it doesn't change. I think about my own mom. I'm 58, she's 86, and she still worries about me, right?
Does she really?
Oh, of course.
Oh, great.
How did your meetings go? I was praying for you. You okay? You look tired at Mass. She watches the noon Mass. You look tired at Mass today. You doing okay? Moms, right? Yeah. No, that's great. God bless all the moms.
So what you're telling me is I'm still going to be worried about my kids in 50 years.
Well, I didn't want to put it that way, but it's true, though, isn't it? Right?
Yeah.
And then, the choice is that you don't. Yeah, the choice is that you build a wall and you don't feel. And that's no way of living.
Yeah, I had a moment recently, and I've been loving on a baby that's been living with us on and off the last 3 months, and one of the last times I gave her back to her parents, and it's not a great environment, and so it hurts every time I give her back.
Sure.
And I was at church, and I went up to Blessed Sacrament, and I bawled and was just like, it hurts so much, but thank you, Lord, that I feel it.
No,
like,
no,
thank
that's
you
absolutely
that I
right.
can feel it. Thank you for this pain and this suffering, and I unite this for her and for protection and for the parents and for grace. And then I was coming out, and a friend of mine who's a big guy just was like, put his arms around me and just held me for a bit. And I very much felt like it was God the Father being like, I love you. This is good. I made your heart this vulnerable and soft for a reason. I'm not a crier.
Yeah.
And I feel like for a long time, I put up a lot of walls so I wouldn't feel. And so it's like, no, I rather feel and my heart be broken.
Yeah, I remember when I was in seminary, I worked in neonatal intensive care, and it was crazy. So that summer, I was in between my second year of seminary, and that summer I baptized 21 babies. And the only reason they called to have me baptized was because the baby was going to die. So it actually gave me a really interesting, in one sense, beautiful theology of baptism, that you are literally being baptized into eternal life.
Yeah.
But the other part of it, it was a surrender of the mother and father, because it's like, okay, well, our child's going to die. We need to get them baptized.
Yeah.
So I remember, again, talking with my mom and my dad on the phone, and it was just really hard. I mean, the father one of the fathers said to me, I didn't ever think the best day of my life and the worst day of my life would be the same day.
Wow.
Or
Yeah.
the mother who's holding her baby who's just passed, who looks at me and says, why is God doing this? It's like, I'm supposed to give an answer to this. Well, let me explain to you why this is happening, right? And I was just talking to mom and dad, and I was upset, and my mom said, I thought, insightful, she goes, I think this is why you'll be a good priest. And I said, what do you mean? She goes, because you're willing to feel.
Yeah.
You're willing to let your heart be hurt and let your heart be broken, and
Meeting them in their pain is huge.
yeah, exactly. And it's one of my occupational hazards of being a priest is being okay with not having the answer for them.
Yeah.
But I think honestly, over the years, people have appreciated that. It's better than some saccharine, oh well, this is why it's happening. When it just, I've always say this, trying to make sense out of things that don't make sense is actually worse. It causes more difficulty and suffering.
And knowing that and knowing that, I think for me, knowing one day, okay, when I get to heaven, it'll all make sense and I'll get it. But he's got the whole picture. I don't.
Yeah.
But so many things, I would do it way different. But
If you were God?
yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my goodness, everything I would do different.
No, I just had a funny thing happen after Mass today with one of the friars. Something happened to him, and he had laughed at me, and it came back to haunt him. And he said, that's the kind of God we have. We have a God who's vindictive and petty and smiting. I mean, that's my kind of God right there, yeah. So if people have nothing to be grateful that we're not gods.
Yeah,
That's-
exactly.
That's fair.
That's something to be super grateful
Yeah,
for.
if there is nothing else in your life to be grateful for, that's great.
Yeah, no, agreed. Well, I would love to chat with you more about, so I've been talking a lot about suffering and pain and just the journey with my own autoimmune stuff and chronic health issues. But I often get asked about like how it affects. So I actually spoke to quite a few people who are engaged to people that have chronic stuff. Last week at Seek, and then also people that are kids whose parents suffer greatly. So I was wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing a bit about your mom.
Yeah, sure. It's interesting just the way you put it, too. I remember one time I was talking about how my life was, I've just been so blessed. And somebody said to me, well, didn't your mom have multiple sclerosis? And I was like,
Well, yeah.
yeah. So what's your point, right? And they go, well, wasn't that difficult? And I said, well, yeah, but it was my life, right? It was my life. And I know you and I have talked a little bit about this, and I'm sure my mom appreciates this, but I said I wouldn't trade it for the world. It's like, I'm sure mom's like, thank you so much. I'm glad my suffering's been such a joy for you. But you can't, again, you and I have talked a little bit about this, that I remember I shared with you the first, when we found out that my mom had MS, and again, this was in the late 60s. This makes me sound so old, right? You didn't have to nod your head so quickly.
So I don't think you're old. Like when we were chatting with Plato, it's his birthday. I'm like, oh yeah, no, we're all around the same age. But then when you say that, I'm like, holy cow, I wasn't born in
we are not
80s.
the same age.
I was born in the 80s. Wow, okay. No, you're not old.
No,
you're young at heart.
No, but the
That's
fact,
what
I
counts.
appreciate that you actually put us in the same category.
I
You're
did
born
earlier.
in the 80s.
Yeah.
What do you mean early, but not anymore?
Well, no, I'm not sure.
Things have changed.
No, I think we're still in that middle age
No,
category.
but the thing, so I was 5 years old, MS, it was not as easy to diagnose back then.
Yeah.
So mom had been in and out of the hospital. So at this particular time, she was in the hospital. And remember, we're sitting in the living room, and my mom had like written us little notes. And again, as a 5-year-old, I'm not able to read. And my dad's emotional because it's a kind of a scary time. And again, we didn't know exactly what this was going to look like. And mom was basically saying, don't worry, I love you, And I remember going into my room and sitting on the edge of my bed, and my older brother comes up and he gives me a hug. So I would have been 5. Jim would have been maybe 11. And he hugs me and he said, "Don't worry, Dave, if mom can't take care of you, I will." It was just really precious, right? It was a really precious moment. But for me, that kind of is a snapshot in what my mom's sickness was, in that we had to take care of ourselves. And I suppose every family takes care of herself. But when you have a family with something like that,
it's a different level.
Yeah, you are. It's absolutely right. There's something different that's asked of you. And it's funny because I've just thought more since you and I talked about it a couple of weeks ago, just more about all of that. And there are so many blessings about it that I've just kind of taken for granted. I shared with you that there are 5 boys and a girl in my family. We can all cook. Little things like that because we had to take our turns. But it was the experience of being able to accept what the Lord brings for you at that day, because you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring.
Yeah.
That's one of the natures of MS. There's hills and valleys and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So one day can be great, and then the next day you just don't know. And there's something about an ability to surrender and accept and really celebrate on good days.
Yeah.
And just, in some ways, just put your head down and get through the bad days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think accepting that too, especially if you have something as a kid that you really want to do, and then wake up and take one look at mom and like, oh, I'm going to go put on the kettle, and do you need help getting downstairs to get in the recliner?
Yeah, not today.
That's the day. Yep.
Yeah.
No extracurriculars, no whatever we wanted to do. It's a day of not leaving the house. Yeah.
Yeah, but we were talking earlier about just, how a mom has to surrender to her will. I mean, in some ways, I think women have to do that differently than men do. But what we learned fairly early is that we all kind of had to do that sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for lots of reasons. But, and, it's funny when I think back about it, I don't, like at this moment, I don't know if I can remember a time that's like, well, mom wasn't where I wanted her to be. And I'm sure there was. But
Interesting.
There wasn't, like, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she wasn't there, or she didn't. It was just, that's interesting. That's funny. I've not thought, I can't think of, oh, my mom wasn't at my play, although it was never in a play or anything like that. But
yeah.
And
I'm sure she missed something, but you,
sure she did.
You didn't care. You weren't offended because
no.
You understood.
And in some ways, I make the same analogy with my father. Is that my father was a physician and was busy and was not able to get to every baseball game. I mean, there were 5 boys in my family. Literally, we would
a lot
have
of baseball
25 games a week, right? But sometimes Dad would come and he would be at my game and Mom. 5 games here, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes at my brother Mark, 5 minutes at my brother Jim. But I would say this with Dad, I would say this with Mom. We knew they always wanted to be there.
Yeah.
And there was something about that they always wanted to be there for one reason or another. But my mom saw a lot of baseball games. A lot of baseball games. And things were just different back then. Getting around, being handicapped and Mom had good days,
Yeah.
Some days that you wouldn't notice, by looking at her, that she would only share this later, that oftentimes, like, again, with MS, you can't, unless she's using her crutches or unless she was in a wheelchair, and there were times that was that case.
But she looked good on the outside.
Right, and they say, oh, you look so good, Margie, and she feels horrible inside.
Yeah.
And she didn't want to say, well, actually, I feel horrible, right?
I know.
And that, she goes, in some ways, that was the part of it that was so hard, the mental part of it.
I find that hard, too.
Yeah.
I got chewed out by someone parking in the Kroger handicap spot.
Mm-hmm.
And someone, because going into the store, I looked fine, and I was okay.
Right.
And this was kind of a good day, but by the time I walked to the back of the store and got milk and then had to come to the front, I was done.
It's done, yeah.
And then when like at checkout, like my body, just everything starts to cramp up, and it becomes excruciating, painful, and I normally have a migraine. And so, like, I need... Like, normally my kids are with me and they help do most of it, but if they're not, I need someone else to load up. And so, like, I took it and I was like, actually, it's my handicap pass.
Yeah.
Thanks, though. Like,
Yeah.
Like I get it, and this Kroger you cannot use those handicap
No.
carts. They do not work. When I travel,
Not
I
that
can
I
use
haven't
them.
tried to.
Oh, they're horrible
yeah.
here. They're like, and it's like you can get whiplash.
Yeah, that's great.
I've used them before. It's been quite humbling. But yeah, I think it's hard when you don't, or like someone was asking me how I was doing, and I honestly was trying to share with her, and she said, well, heck, I don't care what I'd have to suffer with to be as skinny as you.
Yeah, there you go. Nice.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just this little like, wow, like
You really didn't get it.
You really don't get it, you know. And it wasn't her judging me; it was her struggling with weight all of her life.
Yeah, sure.
And she's like, "I'll take whatever costs to be skinny," you know. And it's like, okay, that's another one. Like, all right, Lord, I'll just give this
Isn't that
back
interesting,
over. And I think that at least my kids, I feel like my kids are extremely compassionate.
Yeah.
And obviously you being, I mean, I know you're compassionate, but do you find your brothers are more compassionate than your average guy?
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. Yeah. Compassionate. I mean, I'm gonna make my family look perfect, right? But there has to be a sense of generosity.
Yeah.
Because you have to be generous with your time. There's 6 kids in my family, so that in and of itself ought to cause an individual to be generous. But yeah, helping out. Yeah, my family wasn't perfect, but there was a way that we just knew we were in this together.
Yeah.
You know, and there's something really beautiful about that, I mean, we can laugh about things now that people would probably think you guys are so cold-hearted, but yeah, take advantage of mom's crutches so we could get in the front of line at amusement park, or my mom used to do these rug things, and she'd make these rugs, and we'd call her the happy hooker because she uses these rugs, these hook rugs, and just because when she couldn't do it, she was an unhappy hooker. And maybe we'll cut that.
You got to learn to laugh.
No,
right?
no, that's absolutely right.
Well, I think that's it. I think you don't take yourself too seriously, and you learn to laugh. And I joke that my honeymoon stage ended very quickly and abruptly. And when Matt said in sickness and in health, he had no idea that like 95% would be sickness.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm really sorry. That health is just pretty small. But yeah, it's so humbling, and it's yeah. And it's hard to let other people see you in that.
Yeah, and I can't speak of it for myself, but Mom and I have, and the family's had conversations about the weight that she bears, and I'm sure you deal with this, is not being able to do what she would want to do.
Yeah.
You know, as a mom, moms should be able to do these things. And, you know, even now I've watched Mom, Mom's 86 years old now, and Mom has gone to Mass, I mean, every day of her life for however many decades, and she can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And it raises the question. Mom has been involved in Curcio movement and ministry and leading retreats and all of these kinds of things, and she can't do that anymore. So, what gives her value, and what does she do, because she can't do as much for us anymore, and that's a suffering in and itself.
Yeah, that is.
But it's also an invitation to her, and we talked about this, and an invitation to draw into deeper intimacy with Jesus.
Yeah.
That she doesn't, her identity is never in what she can do for me. Her identity is who she is.
Yeah.
As a daughter before she is a mother,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that's got to be something that you wrestle with. I'm sure you, the mom, wishing your kids didn't have to deal with this. And yet,
Yeah.
I understand. I guess I cognitively understand. I don't know but like I said, I wouldn't trade it. I mean, me and my brothers and my sister we are partly because of what Mom suffered and what we had to deal with, and the opportunities that it presented, and the graces that it presented, and the character that it formed. Yeah.
And even now, like all that she's offering up for love of y'all is huge.
Yeah.
And how much closer is she to our Lord than so many others?
Yeah.
Right? Like I feel like you can't. I don't know. I don't understand euthanasia, but I'm like, I get it if you don't believe in Christ. Like
No.
I don't know how I would get through a bad day,
Mm-hmm.
let alone bad years, right? Without relying on him and turning to him and being united to the Sacred Heart,
No.
and
No, if your suffering isn't in one way or another redemptive, then it absolutely makes no sense. What are we doing?
Yeah.
What are we doing? Why? Here we go again. I mean, again with this, here we go again, and absolutely. Absolutely. If there's not meaning to it, if Christ didn't bring meaning and purpose and unity and grace to that, but that is obviously the nature of the cross. Is that's one of the things I love about being Christian is that we don't have to explain away suffering.
No.
Right? That the suffering is not an absence of something. The suffering is, in fact, a presence of something. And when we can begin to discover that, it really changes everything.
Yeah. And even like Christ embracing the cross, them making fun of like, you're such a fool. Why would you do that? Like, you're so foolish. And it's like, no, this is how I will save all of y'all, all of them, us, and it's like, like I much rather, I don't enjoy suffering. I'm not good at it. I think the Lord gives me a grace to offer it up, and I do think I'm able to offer it up. So like the kids will do impressions of Matt and I, and Matt is like, "G'day, mate, how's it going?" Whatever, and they laugh, and they're like, for me, they like, they imitate me on a bad day, walking like this, and they're like, "Praise you, Jesus, praise you, Jesus," and I'm like, "That's so rude," and Matt's like, "Hey, they're praising God as they make fun of you," and I'm like, "All right, I guess I'll take it, right?" But
it's interesting. So a little glimpse into my world. I'm working on Lenten homilies, right? So Ash Wednesday is the story when Jesus says, "Unless the Son of Man must be lifted up," and that's a reference to Scripture in the Old Testament with the serpent being lifted up. And I've just found myself when I'm going to preach on that day is that sense of he must be lifted up. It's like he shouldn't be, he could have been, he would have been, but he must be. And there's something about that if we go back to that Old Testament text, it's we all know it's the story where they were complaining about God. I can't believe you brought us into the desert. This is awful, and this, that, and the other. So the Lord sends the serpent, and they get bit by the serpent. So Moses goes back and repents. And the Lord does something interesting. He says, if they get bit, then put a serpent on a pole, lift it up, and they look upon that. But it's interesting. Again, if I was God, they wouldn't get bit.
Yeah.
I mean, fix it.
Yeah.
I mean, but
ta-da, snakes have no teeth.
Right. But when they get bit, and that's the reality is that each one of us is going to get bit because of our own unfaithfulness, because of the faithfulness of humanity, because of my personal unfaithfulness. Being bit is a part of it.
Yeah.
But he must be lifted up. And that's the part that's so weird, is that what the Lord invites us to do is to look at the source. There's a Michael Card musician, really, really beautiful, wrote some really Roten.
He be writing.
One of the songs he says is the symbol of our suffering becomes the focus of our faith, right? And the tendency is that we would rather not look at that.
Yeah.
And you don't have a choice.
Yeah, no, I have to look at it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Now your kids, that's the question. Are they willing to look at it? Are they willing to look at it? And the symbol of our suffering becomes a focus. He must be lifted up.
Yeah.
And we look at that. And if we're honest, again, I think we put these little crosses, and we make chocolate crosses, that we make these little crosses.
I know.
You have them. It's so beautiful, right? But if we're able to actually be honest about how it's really quite grotesque.
Yeah.
And that
bloody, bleeding, messy.
And in that we find the Lord present. Yeah.
I had my first son in Ireland, my first child, and my epidural wasn't taken all the way. I had lots of drama, lots of issues, but in rural Ireland. And the doctor said, "We're not finding a heartbeat. We need to get the baby out." And the anesthesiologist said, "She's not numb. You can't cut her open." I was like, "Cut me open."
Yeah, here we
so
go.
They literally tied my arms down. So they were straight out. I don't remember if my legs were tied down or not, but I couldn't move them. And so as I was, so like this is, and I had been praying that whole pregnancy, this is my body given up for you, right? And just really felt united to the cross. But then I found my hour of labor tied down in the shape of a cross with my arms out. And then when they cut, like as soon as they pulled, my body started reacting and I started being sick and they put me under. But it was when I came to, it was the most excruciating pain I've ever felt in my entire life. Like by far, nothing has come close to that pain. I mean, I was cut pelvic bone to pelvic bone and pulled. So it's painful. Anyhow.
I was wondering how much we were going to go. So
it was a giant incision.
Okay.
So Matt was rushed out to the hallway, and but when I came to, I still felt all the pain. When I came to, it was all the pain, but I was sick, so my body's just reacting, and I'm like vomiting all over this nurse, and I just want to know if my baby's okay. I just want to know if he or she, and I, who am simple and flawed, like don't care about the pain, just want to make sure my baby's okay. Like how much more is Christ with us?
Absolutely.
Like he doesn't care. Like I know it was excruciatingly painful, but he happily did it, and just so much love.
Yeah, absolutely. He did it because we do.
Yeah.
Right. I used to think that we suffered because he suffered. No. He suffered because we suffered, right? That's why he takes that upon. That's why he must, because we did it as well. And there's something uniquely different and beautiful in that if I feel I suffer because he did, it's like that's kind of
messed up.
Yeah. But if he suffered because he knew that you were going to be in Ireland and you were that changes it, doesn't it?
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
it changes it.
Yeah, and then what's your thoughts on the night before?
You mean the night before in the agony garden?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, because it gives me hope times that I'm not good at offering it up, or I'm like, I don't want this. And when I talk to people who are suffering so greatly, they're like, I don't want this. I'm like, Jesus didn't either. Like he said, if this cup could pass me, let it.
Yeah.
Like
I rejoice. I'm not being facetious. I rejoice the fact that the night before Jesus died, he said, Father, if there could be any other way.
Yeah.
And he, not only once, but multiple times.
Yeah.
If there could be any other way. Who of us hasn't said that? Who of us hasn't cried it out? And to hear his Father say, there isn't. There just isn't. And that's where, again, the Father does that because he knew that we had to do that. And he knew that suffering is a part of the human condition, right? And Jesus, if he's going to take the human condition, he had to embrace that.
Yeah.
But then, to your point you made earlier, is that continues. Every time I choose something other than him.
Yeah.
He just continues to be present in that, and again, do we want a God? This has been a theological quandary for centuries. Is do we want a God who can suffer? The Greeks didn't. They didn't. But
we'd all be damned if he didn't.
Yeah.
Like because he loved us so much.
Yeah.
And I think about even I feel like mental illness has become such a large thing. And I met multiple people, so many people that are like, you don't understand. My anxiety is so great, or I can't interact with other people. And thinking about Christ, literally his body was so stressed, blood.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I've been stressed before. I've never made it to that level of anxiety or stress where blood is legit pouring out of your body.
Yeah, nor have I.
Yeah.
Nor have I. But have you been to the Holy Land? You've been to the Holy Land.
No, I want to go.
Okay. Yeah, it's one of my favorite places to pray is at the Garden of Gethsemane, and because there's so many things. It's in the Kidron Valley. There's just something about that. First off, to be there, to be around the palm trees around you and all that. The olive trees. But you look across the Kidron Valley, and that's where the soldiers were coming. And it would have been at night. Jesus would have seen them coming. And I was struck by that at any moment he could have said,
no, I'm done.
Enough. But he doesn't. And that continually, and that goes to what you said, that continually embracing this. And some days we do it better than others.
Yeah.
But the day that we're able to find the Lord's presence, and I said this earlier, is that it changes everything. That when, the birth of a baby, a wedding, a sunset, it's easy to find Jesus in that. Mm-hmm. But in infertility or dementia or autoimmune and multiple sclerosis and all those, I think one of the greatest lies and deceptions of the evil one is this desire for us to think that life is supposed to be easy.
Yeah.
M. Scott Peck, have you ever read Road Less Traveled?
No.
It would have been written when you were a kid.
We're still in the same boat. We're still in the same boat.
The first 3 lines of the book are life is difficult. And he spends the road less traveled, the rest of the book just really unpacking that. But the evil one wants to deceive us and cause us to think that it's not supposed to be hard. Because if we believe that, then whenever anything difficult comes, we says, well, it's not supposed to be like this.
Yeah.
And then we try to resist that. We try to run away from that. We try to fight that. We try to change that. Where nowhere in the Gospels does it say, it's in fact quite the opposite. If you want to follow me, deny yourself, pick up your cross and follow me.
Matt and I
evil
say
ones.
that's like our theme is it was harder than it needed to be. Like everything about us, like our relationship, like it's harder than it needs to be. Like we were engaged and he got fired on his birthday, became an illegal alien a month before we got married. So I married an illegal alien. I still loved him. Life was, but like everything with life, like we drove back. All we had to do is return a rental car. No, I get in a massive wreck on the highway. Like everything's just harder than it needs to be. But somehow learning to laugh and smile in it and be like, all right, God's somehow gonna figure this out. Like my priest from back home was so good. Like he gave me more time off for our honeymoon. Like a teen let us stay at his cabin, his family cabin. We canceled our, Dominican Republic honeymoon, all-inclusive resort. And we're like, well, he doesn't have a job. We can't leave the country. Family cabin. That's where we're going.
Texas,
but yeah, like God is good, and yeah, it's harder than it needs to be, but choosing to say yes through it.
Yeah, it is. That's an interesting harder than it needs to be. I'll have to think about that. Pray about it. What does that mean? What does that look like? Because it seems to me, and it's funny because I say this and people say, well, yeah, but you've had to go through this, that, and the other. But it seems like maybe yourself, that there are some that just get a little bit more.
Yeah. I feel that.
That just get a little bit more. And why is that? I mean, in the Lord's divine wisdom, is it because you'll say yes more? I don't know.
I think that there is this invitation to come closer to his heart, like his big, bloody, sacred heart. I have this. If I have it in here, I'll show you. This artist. I love this.
There's nothing big about that.
There's nothing what?
Big about that.
Yeah, but I feel like certain ones of us, I feel like we're all called to follow him, and we're all called to be close. And some of us start off very young following him, and others it's later, and others I feel like he's just hugging us into his heart. And sometimes it's a thorn that's just really digging in, and I don't know, he's inviting us into a different level. I would not be holy if I didn't suffer.
Yeah.
And I'm not that holy. Like I'm barely.
No. I get that though. I get that. But again, and you know this, you become a sinner or you become a saint with suffering. Because we've met people who've suffered and have become bitter and walked away from the Lord, and it was not supposed to be like this. It's not supposed to be so hard. Why you've duped me, O Lord, and they walk away. So there's a grace that's been available, and I believe it's available to everybody. So I don't think that the Lord Scripture reminds us that he doesn't have preference, right? That he loves us all the same. But that you said yes to that.
Yeah.
And to whom much is given, much is expected.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. The whole Lord, if this is how you treat your friends, I see why you have so few.
Here's a problem at the beginning. You should have just totally muffed it up, and then you would say, oh, this girl can't handle this. But apparently, you did all right. Yeah.
Oh, he's so good. Yeah. Yeah, some of my best prayer times, I would love to go to the Holy Land. Like, that sounds amazing. That sounds so good. But some of my best prayer times have, like, been on the bathroom floor.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it's, like, I didn't mind it before I had kids. I feel like that's where I have a harder time. And I feel like that's where I wanted to talk to you, because I feel bad for them. I have amazing, wonderful, beautiful kids, and I love them so much. And I know the Lord will, right straight with crooked lines. I just hate that I feel like I'm their big, giant crooked line.
Yeah, and that's a part of the cross that you'll have to bear as well, is the physical part and that part. Because from my experience, this was what the Lord was inviting me. This was the cross that I was given. And don't take that away from them.
Yeah.
The cross that I was giving was to watch my mom, knowing that there's not a lot I could do about it.
Yeah.
The cross that I was giving was, you're a netter, right?
Yeah.
When I went away on net, so I was 20 years old, and I get a letter. Have you ever written a letter?
Yes,
Piece of paper,
on net we wrote letters.
Okay,
I was pre-cell phone.
Okay,
there was a team cell phone.
Oh, there you go.
I was pre-cell phones net.
That's something. I get this letter from Mom, and it was really, really precious. And she was just talking about how she was hoping that I have a good experience in this, that, and the other. But she was talking about how, and so there are I'm the oldest of the three little boys. So I will always be one of the three little boys. I'm 58 years old, and I'm still one of the three little boys when my family gets together. But I also, for a number of reasons, because my older brothers left and this, that, and the other to school, I was kind of the next son that just helped out with a lot, you know, and just maybe just a little bit of a different relationship with mom and dad because of that. But she said, I knew that you were going to leave one day, you know, and that you had to leave. And there were, the ink was splotched because she was crying, and it dripped on the piece of paper and just kind of, but yeah, I wouldn't take that away from her, and she wouldn't take it away from me. That when I left, I felt like, can I leave? I mean, she needs me. They need me, but
the Lord was calling you.
Yeah. I wouldn't be sitting here right here with you if it wasn't for that. And that was part of my suffering. That was part of my cross, knowing that there wasn't a lot I could do for her. And in some ways, I'm always careful about comparing suffering. But you may experience this as well, being a mom. Would you rather suffer, or would you rather watching your kids suffer?
Oh, me, 100%.
Yeah, 100%,
yeah.
right? So watching my mom saying, you know,
so much harder.
Yeah, let me take this. I'll do this for a while, and knowing that it's hers to bear, and knowing that is mine to bear. And this, unless you've experienced it, you may not know, but there's a great suffering in saying, I just wish I could take that away from her, and I can't. And that, to be able to embrace that, and I think that's, you've got a beautiful image of Our Lady there.
Oh yeah.
But I think that's part of what is it? Our Lady watches her son go to the cross, knowing that he was innocent, knowing that he had done nothing wrong, and also knowing that there's nothing she could do about it except to walk with him. Yeah. And that's what you do with your kids. That's what I do with my mom.
And I think that's the hardest bit. I remember when my youngest was in the NICU and I wasn't allowed to touch him or hold him. I guess his lungs, he'd cry and they'd puncture. But a good doctor friend of mine said, you can't touch him, but Our Lady can. She can wrap her immaculate mantle around the incubator. And just over and over entrusting him to her and watching him suffer broke my heart. Like like that was way harder than myself suffering. But asking, because Our Lady knows, like the Pietà. I get that. Like I feel so united to her in that, just the heart of a mom. Like that is the heart of a mom, and having your broken, bloody son in your arms. Yeah,
and you'll have a different perspective of that when your kid is 18 years old.
Yeah.
Who he can't do anything to help his mom. And that's the heart of the son. You know, the son that I'm sure, you know, there's the image of in the stations of Jesus meeting his mother, and with all that's going on, he's just like, I watched, and you know this, I watched my older brother die, and that in itself was difficult, but watching a mother and a father lose their son. I mean, and then him, I mean, the last evening we had together, was it the last evening? I think, or maybe the second to last evening, we had Mass together. It was really a great, beautiful blessing. But my brother talked to my mom, you know, there, and said, I know that this is so hard for you, and just a very honest conversation about, you know, what it is for mom and dad to watch their son die, you know. And but again, it was that evening. It was in the middle of COVID, which was just the world was just so messed up. But to be with my family, just my family, and celebrate Mass, and just talk about what people's suffering was, and in the angles and the views and the histories and the stories. But the Lord is present. I mean, He was profoundly present.
How beautiful that you guys could all be there, and that you could offer Mass as well.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, the last, long story, it was in the middle of COVID, so when Mark was in the hospital, nobody could go visit him. Not even mom and dad. I went home twice and tried to pull the priest card. You know, he's clergy. It didn't matter. So the decision, honestly, for my brother was really because of part of that he knew that nobody could be with him. So he said, well, I'll just go home. Yeah. And so he came home on a Thursday. The whole family came and spent the weekend, and then he died. But just that opportunity to be family together, you know. And one of the things I appreciate is that we didn't say anything that we hadn't said before. You know, it's like, I've always wanted to tell you. It's like, there was none of that because we talked about it all before. But just, we had mass and we watched a football game, which is the way it should be, right? But then the last many days of my brother's life, my mom and dad were able to bring him Eucharist. So it's just something about that, a mother and a father bringing their son, Jesus, in the Eucharist, and their last many days of things where they could actually be together and talk and stuff was them bringing him Eucharist. And there was something about that unity of Christ's suffering, the sacrifice, and mother and a father and a son, and it was just something that was really...
He's the overflow of their love, even though he's a grown-up, right? He's still their precious little boy. And for them to be able to bring him Eucharist is beautiful.
There's something really, really beautiful about that.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Doesn't get easier, though.
No.
Yeah. So.
Great, thanks. So.
Yeah. No, I mean.
Gotta get worse. No, not worse. Just different.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think I'm always shocked about, like, there's just enough grace. Like, I feel like, like the drop. I'm like, come on, Lord, could you not just give me a bucket for a bit? Nope. One drop at a time, you know?
Yeah, I think what he promises is he'll give us what we need. Like, this is one of the things I love. There are many things I love about Francis, but St. Francis, and he says, "Oh God, you are enough for me," and I've just prayed about that so much over the years. He didn't say you're everything for me. I've met people who they have everything, and it's not enough. Imagine if that was actually true. Lord, you are enough. Yeah. And he says, you're enough for me. That's pretty remarkable. Yeah. So that next drop is going to be enough. Yeah. Now, we want more than enough.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. We want it not to hurt as much, you know? Yeah. Or I think about just your parents with your brother dying. Like, I've lost a couple kiddos, miscarriages, and one I was further along. And I remember this one, I knew I was losing him. And I was holding a baby. We were living at Cocrest at the time, and this baby was like probably 1.5, ran up to me and was he wasn't normally affectionate, but he was kissing me and like rubbing my face, and like he knew. I think he knew what was going on. So I was holding him, and then at one point, and he just kept loving on me and hugging me and kissing me, and I felt like we're, the tiny chapel at Cocrest. So I'm in that tiny chapel. Yeah. And he's just loving on me, and I'm cramping, and I'm in excruciating pain. But it was calming to have this little guy with me. And then at one point he fell asleep, and he was so heavy, and I was just holding him, and I just felt like the Lord calling me to surrender more. And then he crapped himself. The whole church reeked of poo.
That's so great.
Big, giant poo. And the Lord, and I was just like, oh, like I could barely breathe, right? And the Lord was like, that's you. Like, I know that you're in so much crap right now, and I know it stinks, and I'm so sorry, but I am here. I am here. Yeah. And just as he's surrendering and trusting in you, holding him, like, you need to do that with me. Like, I'm here in this. Yeah. Like, I know, like, it stinks, but just surrender and... Yeah, and again, the question we have to ask ourselves is, again, as St. Francis would say, is that enough? I also reflect on Benedict when he's talking to a rabbi. He does this in the first book that he does on the trilogy, and he's talking about this rabbi, and he says that the rabbi says, you say Jesus is the Prince of Peace, but there's still war. You say he's the bread of life, and there's still hunger. What did Jesus bring? And Benedict says he brought God. He brought God, and then he goes on to say, and for some people that's not enough, right? That to that scene, to that mess, to that just craziness, he brought God to that. And again, when we can discover him there, we can discover him. It changes radically changes our spiritual life. When we're not just saying it, but we're actually experiencing the Lord's presence. And I realize that there's a grace, and you've mentioned that really beautifully, that a danger is to say, well, just make that happen, right? Yeah. But it's more about just being available to it and being present to it, and just asking the Lord to break in the middle of it. Yeah, there was an image that, back to when I was a seminarian, actually the reason I tried to get an internship in the neonatal intensive care was because of my mom, and recognizing that sickness and infirmity impacts the family. So I wanted to be at a NICU where I could really minister to the family, because that had been my experience. But it was in many ways, just a horrible summer. And this image that I had, I wrote in my journal. I said, "God, you seem like a stranger I once knew." And it was just this. The image that I put again in my journal was this fog. It was just this fog that was around me.
I remember it was a Thursday evening. I was in a small chapel in Washington, D.C., and the Lord just kind of, it'd been a long time since I really heard him and experienced his presence. And the psalm says, in my confusion, you hid your face, you hid your face and I was put to confusion. It's like this phrase, the Lord, you've been hiding your face from me. And into that, I heard the Lord say to me, Dave, don't you know that I love you? And I stopped him. I said, well, okay, I appreciate that, but that's not the issue. Let me explain to you what the issue is. I go this whole thing. It's like, I'm about to be a priest, and I don't know the answers, and what do I say to these people, and why are these babies dying, and all their hopes and dreams and all that. And God's just kind of patient, and he says, don't you know that I love you? And I just really began to weep in that. And I said, Lord, would you just lift the fog? And I heard the Lord say so clearly, don't you know that I'm in the middle of that fog? And it's like, no, I thought how this works is you'll lift it. I can see the beauty in it. It's like, no, don't you know I'm in the middle of that? It's like, oh my goodness. That's right. You know, we want him to lift it, but the reality is he's in the middle of it. Yeah. It changes everything. It really does. It doesn't make it easier.
It's the same with the pain and the suffering. Like he's in the middle of it, of course.
Yeah. But it changes it. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Pretty cool.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And the reality is it's the older I get, which I think is something we've established quite well in this little podcast, our time together, is it's always that, Kim. It always comes back to that, is the suffering and the difficulty. It's the human condition. And if we're willing to enter into that with one another, and even in our own heart and our own mind, the scriptures, the stories, it's just not. There's a way that we can. It's one of the issues I have with some movies that we do on Jesus, that it's just kind of this story that's out there. But when it becomes so personal that it changes it. Yeah, it's not just Jesus isn't just an elixir that makes things better, right? Yeah. He's the lover that meets us in the middle of whatever we find ourselves in. Yeah. Amen?
Amen.
There you go.
Amen. That's all we needed.
There you go. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you, all of you, for just being part of this conversation. I feel like I just got so much out of this.
It's fun. It's really great.
It's not really for them. It's not for you. It's not about you. It's just about me and what I needed.
Right,
So thank you.
This is great.